Sharon Wilson and I conduct fieldwork in the Permian Basin, the largest oil and gas field in the United States that's on track to become the world's largest source of climate pollution. With an optical gas imaging camera that makes invisible toxic vapors and climate pollution visible, we scour the oil fields to find methane blasting into the air, unlit flares, and countless other violations from oil and gas operators. During this trip in December of 2021, we are 1 year into the Biden administration. In the air, there is hopeful rhetoric from the administration that things are getting better. From his lofty speeches at COP26 in Glasgow to the infrastructure bill that President Biden touts as the most progressive climate plan in US history, we are told that things are getting better. But during this week of fieldwork, we cannot see the president's rhetorical optimism. We smell hydrogen sulfide. We feel the heat of fossil fuel infrastructure in flames. Frack quakes shake our beds and wake us up in the early morning. We see methane emissions at levels worse than during the Trump administration. A sandstorm hits us. We witness climate destruction and see everything but a plague of locusts. One of the most striking visuals of the dangers of climate destruction is a spectacle which didn't even require OGI. A few minutes' drive from the city of Pecos, Texas, we see a mushroom cloud of black smoke contaminating the sky. Sharon was investigating a flare off US Highway 285, so I jumped in the car quickly to investigate the plume. I pulled up to the source of the black plume of smoke, a compressor station. Compressor stations are one of the many dangerous, fragile pieces of fossil fuel infrastructure which the industry employs. Its main purpose is to facilitate the flow of oil and gas through an endless web of pipelines which underlie the Permian. The station was on fire. Bright orange flames engulfed the machine, pumping black smoke into the air. I was parked about 300 feet from the flame to capture the scene on camera. A few firefighters and police surrounded the area. One of them said to me, "You know this is a compressor station. If that thing blows, you're gone." If that thing blows, you're gone. The officer's words rang in my head for hours. I immediately thought about the residential neighborhood on F Street, not far away. What if this compressor station was as close to this community as the tanks, flares, and wellheads on F Street that are less than 300 feet from backyards and playgrounds? This was a reminder of the dozens and hundreds and thousands of lives taken by the violent extraction of oil and gas.
This is an unlit flare operated by Callan Energy. What you see there is optical gas imaging technology capturing methane and VOC emissions. You see it with your own naked eye. You see nothing. But this is what they're hiding. Greenhouse gases.
Blowdowns are another source of emissions from the oil field. In this fragile system of oil and gas, compressor stations and pipelines routinely and intentionally dump tons of methane into our air because some of the parts of the process have malfunctioned or need maintenance. Around this area, we've discovered a blowdown event from the El Paso natural gas pipeline in 2020. On this trip, in a similar area, we discovered yet another blowdown. A compressor station spurted jets of methane and VOCs approximately every 40 seconds.
See, they're venting it. It's venting out of that pipe.
In this dirty industry, greenhouse gas emissions are nearly impossible to avoid. Witnessing the climate destruction from the oil fields makes it increasingly clear that it is essential to keep oil and gas in the ground and transition to clean, renewable energy.
I have spent about 2 decades sounding the alarm on the dangers of fracking. It impacted my air and water. One of the objectives of our field work is to communicate to the world with our videos and complaint documentation the harm to our climate from normally invisible oil and gas pollution. The media is an important part of that. We aim to bring them with us whenever possible so that they can report on the realities of fossil fuel industry from a first-hand perspective on the ground. This is what we planned this Friday, December 10th, but our plans were prevented. A sandstorm hit the Permian while we attempted to conduct our field work with the media in tow. Intense winds bellowed. Sand, dirt, gravel, and caliche clashed against the car, the OGI camera, and our faces. We could barely keep our eyes open. In a way, the storm was an example of how oil and gas has destroyed this region's natural vegetation. Before the fracking boom, this region was known for its agriculture, an example being the famous Pecos cantaloupes. Now, however, thousands of miles of land have been cleared of their natural vegetation to make way for pipelines, well pads, roads, processing plants, and other infrastructure.
We're looking at a vent pipe at an Oxy petroleum site in the Permian Basin, and the purpose of this pipe is to dump methane into our atmosphere. Just get rid of it, let it vent into the atmosphere.
In North Texas, we watched in horror as fracking waste brought earthquakes that damaged sheetrocks, foundations, and cracked sidewalks. The Permian region has also seen skyrocketing earthquakes caused by oil and gas extraction. In 2021, earthquakes in Texas doubled. The main culprit of these earthquakes is wastewater injection from fracking and oil and gas production. In December, the Texas Railroad Commission ordered 33 drilling wastewater disposal well operators to immediately cease operations and hopefully lower the frequency and severity of earthquakes. But almost half did not comply. The injection of wastewater underground and high pressure from hydraulic fracturing, which increases oil and/or gas flow from the formation, increases seismic activity, triggering increased earthquakes that over time increase in magnitude. The earthquake woke me up at 6:20 a.m. Wednesday morning, December 15th. I waited until 7:21 a.m. I texted Miguel, "Did you feel the earthquake? It woke me up. My bed was shaking." It also woke him up. This is a common experience in the Permian. Not only does the increased seismic activity pose risk of expensive property damage for community members, it also poses an existential water emergency for the entire region. Increased seismic activity underground could break the cement casings of oil and gas wells. Especially crumbling of old oil and gas wells might spill toxic fluids into regional water tables and aquifers, contaminating water sources locally. As we usually do, we checked out a cluster of oil and gas sites on Shaw Road, a few miles west of Pecos. I've exposed the dirty deeds of the operator, MDC Texas operator, multiple times. Over the years, I've submitted dozens of complaints to the TCEQ regarding MDC's malfunctioning and unlit flares and venting tanks. This is the road where we discovered through public information requests that MDC drilled holes in 18 tanks to vent toxins. MDC has even been covered by Bloomberg as a case study of corporate greed and environmental destruction. On this particular trip, we found out the operator of the sites had changed. It's now owned by Maple Energy Holding, LLC. Though MDC was out of the picture, emissions were still horrifying. We discovered what we call a double whammy of unlit flares.
What we have here is not one unlit flare blasting methane into the atmosphere. We have two unlit flares. This is methane, and it is 86 times more potent than CO2 at warming our planet. I cannot even find the end of this plume. It is so gigantic. And check that out. There's a worker on site, and he's not doing anything about it. This was also unlit when we came by here yesterday evening. So, there you have it. This should be a crime.
Yeah, they're environmental. See how they're filming you too?
Yeah, I'm filming.
Girlfriend. She's just interested in what y'all do. That's it.
Yeah. Hi, this is Sharon.
This is Miguel. We saw two major unlit flares. It was a double whammy. Both of them were emitting extreme amounts of methane. A few minutes later, an oil and gas worker shows up and basically threatens us. Said that someone was messing with the valves inside the oil and gas sites. Although we've just been on the public road, we've never entered into their property. But yeah, he said that we were looking suspicious and that he had our information. I assume meaning he had our rental plate numbers. But yeah, what we just witnessed here is horrible. It was a horrible, extreme amount of methane being emitted.
And an invitation for us to be very intimidated.
Yeah.
I'm not. Are you, Miguel?
No, only more fired up.
Yeah, okay. We'll talk to you later.
As we head into 2022, production in the Permian is still raging. Expansion of new oil and gas sites and greenhouse gas emissions are still skyrocketing. In fact, the Permian is producing at record-breaking all-time high levels, more than 5 million barrels of oil per day. As oil production in the Permian grows, so does the release of methane gas, which accelerates climate change at over 80 times the rate of carbon dioxide. Despite the Biden administration's pledge to reduce methane emissions 30% by 2030, the Permian Basin could produce more oil, gas, and gas liquids in the next 30 years than it has in the past century. A massive build-out of gas processing plants, pipelines, export terminals, and petrochemical complexes has emerged to facilitate this growth, creating a network of industrial pollution from southeast New Mexico to the Gulf Coast of Texas and Louisiana. And unfortunately, according to market projections and the business plans of oil and gas, the Permian is only expected to grow. Unless we stop this industry in its tracks and build enough community power to transition to a just, green economy that works for all of us. We've got work to do.